Hi, I'm Teresa Coenen, Stitchin Quilts, and this is our 6th installment of the From Marti and Me Pattern Club. This month we'll be using Marti's original pattern, Carpenter's Wheel. We'll also be using her templates set A and C. Please join us as we explore Marti's Carpenter's Wheel. The fabric that we use for our store sample is from Mood Swings by Winging a Prayer. The finished quilt ends up measuring 31 inches square. It makes a great little wall hanging for any home. Please join us. Let's take a look at Marti's pattern. As always, Marti's pattern is chock full of additional information. On the inside cover of the first page, page 2 it actually is pictures of 3 different block of the month quilts that can be made with this Carpenter's Wheel as the center medallion of the quilt. We'll be starting this block of the month program in January, so if you're interested, let me know. You'll already have the Carpenter's Wheel block, so you'll just have patterns to pick up for the rest of the blocks. Then Marti explains making a carpenter's wheel on page 3. She talks about the Y seam and how her unit is constructed without using any Y seams. On page 5, she shows the old-fashioned way for making a carpenter's wheel, which does include the Y seams. Pages 6 and 7 are a description of the template unit, template set A, and how it can be used. And then on page 8, we begin with the fabric chart for the 31-inch Carpenter's Wheel wall hanging that we have. It's really important to use this fabric chart for doing this wall hanging in order to get your fabric placements in the right order. If you don't want to write on the chart, then please make a photocopy of this page because you're going to need it. For our sample that we used, fabric A, we chose a cream background. Fabric B, which it shows a dark square here, but that's where we use our lighter blue. Fabric C, we made a change. You'll notice on Marti's pattern, the Lemoyne Star unit and the Carpenter's Wheel have the same fabric in it. And for our sample, we wanted to have 2 different colors of fabric. So our Lemoyne Star is half of C, and our Carpenter's Wheel is the other half. So for half of C, we did the dark blue. For the other half, we did the dark red. So the difference on yardage for that, if you're going to do 2 different colors, for the Lemoyne Star, you just need a scrap because you'll need to have 8 number 2 triangles, so fat 16th is sufficient. For the fabric for the Carpenter's Wheel, we use dark red, and for that you'll need a fat quarter. Fabric D is our light red. Marti says to use a 15 by 21 inch piece of fabric, but we just used a fat quarter. For the first border and the binding, we chose to make them the same color fabric. We chose green. And for the second border, Marti calls for 3/8 of a yard. We chose a border that had a print to it, so we cut a half a yard so that you would have room to fussy cut the 3-inch strip where you want it. Other notations to make to Marti's fabric, or Marti's cutting chart, is to pay attention to how you're going to cut your strips. For this particular quilt, Marti points out that we should be using length of fabric. So make sure that you're folding over your fabric pieces and cutting from length of fabric. In fabric A, to cut the 12 number 1 squares, we cut 2 strips from the length of fabric that was folded over, so it's actually 4 pieces of fabric. And to cut the 8 2 plus 2 triangles, we cut that from 2 strips from the length of fabric. In fabric B, we cut 1 strip, again that's folded over, so it's 2 pieces of fabric. Fabric C, to cut the number 2 triangles, you need 8 for the Lemoyne Star and 16 for the Carpenter's Wheel, and for that we needed 1 strip of the length of fabric, again that's folded over. Fabric D, we needed 2 strips length of fabric folded over. For the first border, they're cut 1.5 inches wide. You'll need 2 strips at 24.5 inches and 2 strips at 26.5 inches. For the second border, it's 3-inch cut wide, and you'll need 2 2 that are 26.5 inches long, and 2 that are 31.5 inches long. And for the binding, you're going to need to cut 4 strips. Page 9 includes information on making cuts for the units. And page 10 and 11 page 10 and 11 tell us how to cut the 2+2 triangles and parallelograms. We would call these 2+2 triangles flying geese units, and then the parallelograms, which I demonstrated in the cutting. The most important thing to note on page 12, I would circle this parallelogram right here. That's the direction that your parallelograms need to point. They need to point to the left. If you don't have your parallelograms pointing to the left, you're going to have trouble constructing your Lemoyne star and getting your colors in the right order. Pages 13 through 17 are the construction and finishing for this particular quilt. Page 18 shows a different method of making the quilt with a different border. It also has a fabric chart. And page 25 begins some bed-size quilts using the Carpenter's Wheel. Again, Marti's pattern is chock just full of different things that you can do with her particular template set and with this Carpenter's Wheel. At the back of the booklet is the templates that you can use. This is particularly helpful for that C15, for that 4 3/4 inch square that needs to be cut on the diagonal. You can use this template piece if you choose to make that cut. It makes it nice and easy. Now let's get started. Today we'll be working with Marti's original pattern, Carpenter's Wheel, and we'll be using set A of Marti's templates. You'll notice that set A and set B are identical as far as the types of templates that are included. Set A, however, makes different sizes of blocks, and so in your set A block you'll be able to make 24-inch, 17-inch, and 12-inch blocks. Let's take a look at what's included in set A. You'll want to take these pieces off of the paper and take the paper off the backing, but in set A you have block number 1, which is a 3-inch square, block number 2, which is the half square unit, block number 3, which is the square set on point, block number 4, which is the quarter square unit, block number 5, which is 1/4 of a 3-inch block, block number 6, which is the half square unit of block number 5, and block number 7, which is the quarter square unit. You'll note that on page 8 of Marti's pattern, she includes a fabric chart to make this Carpenter's Wheel. It's really important to maybe use that fabric chart or photocopy that fabric chart so you can write down the different fabrics that you're using. Many of the blocks that you'll be using are the same size, so it's easy to get confused. For our store sample, we chose cream for our background. We chose light blue for our fabric B. We chose dark blue for our fabric C. So for our fabric C, we have a fat 1/16 of dark blue. And then for the rest of fabric C, which is the outside edge of the Carpenter's Wheel, we're using the dark red. And we've included a fat 1/4 of the dark red. For our fabric D, we have the medium red. For our first border in our binding, we're using the green. And for our second border, we're using this paisley print. When we're making the Carpenter's Wheel block, again, grain line comes into play. Remember how important it is when Marti says to talk about the lengthwise grain of fabric being our straightest grain and the grain that has the least amount of stretch. We'll be cutting our 2+2 blocks and most of our blocks for this particular quilt from the lengthwise grain of fabric. Beginning with our background fabric, remove your selvage edge and use your block number 1 to square up your unit. I have double width fabric here, so you'll be cutting through 2 fabrics at the same time. And you'll need to make 2 cuts to get your background squares. Once you have made those 2 cuts, you can stack your fabrics on top of each other, so that you'll be cutting through 4 layers of fabric. Using your template number 1. You'll need to have 12 squares total for background fabric. Once you've cut those squares, you can use the back side of an old rotary mat to engineer those corners. Remember to engineer those corners simply using a rocking motion.